your local enterprise office, helping your business respond.
A big hello and very, very welcome to the very first Lunch and Learn from the local enterprise office. Very first session, one of many, I hope. And today we're going to be talking about all things HR. So everything HR related. I'm delighted to say that I have the quite incredible Caroline McEnery from the HR suite with us today. Now, she's not only the managing director of the HR suite, she's also an author. So I feel very, very excited to have her. So the author of a book called The Art of Asking the Right Questions. And that's not all. She's an adjudicator with the Workplace Relations Commission. Very fancy. But most importantly, she's been helping lots and lots of Irish businesses get their HR house in order during the pandemic that sadly is COVID-19. So for the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to talk about HR issues that are important for your business. But before we do that, let's say a big hello to Caroline. Caroline, how you doing?
Great, Greg. Delighted to be talking to you. I think we're in a good way through the whole pandemic, so we're hopefully in a more prepared place. And yeah, we've lots to cover this afternoon, so hopefully it'll be of benefit to everybody.
Well, here's hoping. So what are we going to talk about today? This is me getting used to technology here. Here's what we're going to cover today.
So we're going to have a good chat about like having a proactive HR plan in place for your people, because for most people the two key challenges have been the finance and the people. And today we're going to cover all things people. We're also going to talk about maximizing productivity at this time, because there's been lots of changes in terms of how we work, what's going on in terms of the type of work, different formats in terms of remote working, in terms of vital workers. They're absolutely up the walls and doing an amazing job. And then we're going to talk about managing morale and managing business continuity. So when we come out the other end, we'll be in a very positive place.
Okay, fantastic. So just as we start, something I'm sure we'll get back to, but you've been working on a very, very nice HR guide for businesses to guide them through COVID-19. And you've been working with Enterprise Ireland and the local enterprise offices. Tell me about this guide that you've developed for the local enterprise and Enterprise Ireland.
Yeah, so Karen Fernandez, a really brilliant person in Enterprise Ireland, felt with her colleagues that there was going to be a need to give employers a kind of a good guidebook and a kind of a signpost toolkit to help give people lots of information, but to make it really practical and break it down into bite-sized chunks. So I think people are going to absolutely find it hugely helpful. It's very practical, it's very easy to use, and it's giving you kind of top tips and guidelines, and it's signposting you in relation to the right things to be doing at the moment. So whether you're an SME, whether you have HR within your organization or whether you don't, this guide will be really, really useful for you. And that's being launched this week. So I would recommend that you all get a copy, and I think you'll find it really useful.
Okay, and I'm reliably told when it goes live, which could be as soon as today, we're going to be able to download it at localenterprise.ie/response. So that's where it's going to sit. So localenterprise.ie/response. That's where we're going to access this amazing HR guide. As regards, let's talk about legal implications for businesses as we go through COVID-19. We've been talking to a few businesses this week, and they have some fairly obvious concerns, and they're very worried about even letting a staff member go and not doing the right thing and getting themselves into legal high water. Another issue that a lot of people have talked about is data protection, and how can I keep my data and my servers and my information secure if everyone's accessing that content from home. So let's talk legal for a second. What are the legal implications for businesses at the moment?
Okay, so I suppose a lot of employers have had to change people's work practices. So some businesses have had to lay staff off, more businesses have had to reduce people's hours, and more people have had to lay staff off. So we're going to briefly go through each just to make sure people are clear in relation to what we're talking about. So the first option is short time, and that means that you would reduce people's hours and they would be to 3 days or less than what the full-time employee would usually work. If that's the case, then they would be able to apply to get the 2 days that they're not working in terms of a short-time benefit. The other option is for the employer to lay somebody off. So for businesses that are closed at the moment, layoff is probably necessary. And the layoff option basically means you pause the person's contract of employment. And it's important to check what does your contract of employment say in relation to how you manage layoff. For some businesses, they have had people on short time, and now as business is getting quieter, they've had to maybe move somebody from short time onto layoff. And for some businesses, they've had to go straight to layoff because they closed automatically. So they're the two options. If you go with the layoff option, it means that you're pausing their contract of employment. So there's two support options available. You can either do the COVID-19 €350 payment, which the employee applies for themselves, and they get that for up to 12 weeks. And then that's the payment they receive. They're not working during that time. They don't accrue holidays during that time. Everything is paused in the contract of employment. Alternatively, there's the wage subsidy scheme, and the wage subsidy scheme facilitates you to pay the person up to 100% of their wages, and 70% is refunded from the government for employees within certain categories, and also now up to 85% for lower paid workers. So again, there's different criteria, all of which you'll find in that guide, the full information as to what's relevant to you. The good thing about the wage subsidy is the employees can be at work and the turnover is down minus 25%, but you can get that top up and employees can be at work. Alternatively, they can be on layoff and also they're on the payroll. So in other words, there might be no work available for them, but they're back on the payroll. If they're on the wage subsidy, then they're a normal employee, holidays accrue, service accrues, etc. Whereas if they're on layoff, everything is paused. So that's the key differences between them. And for most employers, legally, I suppose they've been the processes they've been followed. And like in HR, we're always saying, make sure you do a paper trail, and it's no different in this scenario. And I think employers have handled it well overall, but it's uncharted waters. Most employers, or employees for that matter, haven't had to go through this process already. A lot of employers still haven't set up the bank account details properly for them to get the wage subsidy scheme paid back into their bank accounts. There's teething problems in terms of getting it up and running, but they are very positive schemes to facilitate support to keep as many people getting income as possible during this period of time.
Okay, fantastic. So say you're a business and your business is down. There's not enough work for the employees, or very little for them to do. I know this might sound like a silly question, but business will pick up again as soon as this pandemic is over, and I want to prepare for the way out of this. What scheme would be the best to use for my employees? Am I better to try to retain them if I can, or lay them off if there's little or no work? It might sound like a bit of a silly question, but the reality is, say there's very little work going through, not enough to potentially keep all my staff busy, but I know after this pandemic, things are going to pick up again. What is my best option? Am I better to lay people off, or am I better to try to retain them?
I would say if you can keep people on the wage books, which is using the wage subsidy, that's a much better option. because it means that you can be getting your staff to do projects, they can be doing training, they can be doing, we all have a to-do list in terms of what you'd love to be doing, but you never got around to doing. So with the wage subsidy, you can hopefully retain people on the books and maximize that opportunity. So I suppose we're trying as many people as possible to keep them on the payroll, because the transition will be easier. But for some businesses, they've no option but to go with layoff. And there's not a right or a wrong answer. I think the important thing is that you really proactively communicate with your employees to let them know what's happening, let them know the implications for them, let them know it's a short time option, and we're all going to be, returning once it's over, because, people are stressed, people are emotionally worried. So the more we can do from a communication piece, the better from that perspective.
Okay, fantastic. Now, there's a great question in. So I'm going to fire this at us. Are there any tax implications at the end of the year for employees where the wage subsidy scheme has been used?
So yes, possibly there are. Great question. Basically, what Revenue have said, and a Revenue or Administration team, they've said that they're going to rebalance tax credits at the end of the year for anybody that needs to have their tax credits rebalanced. However, if they do that, it's going to be done on a very phased basis. So we're hoping that it's not going to have much impact on employees. But the difference for a lot of employees are, without the wage subsidy scheme, their employer can't retain them. So I think employees appreciate that that's a challenge that's in place, but they're willing to go with that, on that basis.
Okay, brilliant. Fantastic. A couple of other questions that have come in. How can I and staff members access information at home? The biggest concern that this person has is they're worried about security and even data breaches, with everyone having access to maybe sensitive information remotely at home. Any thoughts?
Okay. Great question. Yeah, great question. So I would say you're right to be concerned. I suppose the data protection or the GDPR legislation requires us to ensure we keep data safe and secure, and we do everything we can to do that. I would say dust off your staff handbook and remind people of your GDPR, remind them of the remote working policy. For clients, we've been recommending that they would do a COVID-19 or a coronavirus policy for staff, which reminds them of what's relevant now. So whether that's absence, whether that's the sick policy, the benefits that they can get, whether that's GDPR, remote working, etc. That COVID-19 policy or that coronavirus policy is really important to ensure people are clear on their obligations, because if a data breach occurs, we'll have to show we did all we could, especially if it's personal sensitive data. So if people are working from home, we need to make sure that they have somewhere safe and secure to hold that data, because at the start there was a bit of a panic when we went to remote working, where everybody just went to remote working, and now it's only we're retrospectively saying, hang on a second, have we everything in place in relation to GDPR, etc. So a very good question, and definitely something worthy of reminding people of, because a lot of people are working from home remotely, but it's not normal remote working where people have a desk and an office and an appropriate spot, or a secure filing cabinet. A lot of people are working remotely with kids running around the place. They might be sharing a house with a lot of other people. So it brings all new challenges, particularly around GDPR and productivity, I suppose, as well,
Absolutely. So it was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, all this, because we had to react quick. So we need to take stuff back, take stock of things again, and remind our staff of their GDPR and other HR responsibilities. The HR handbook that you have for your business applies in the home when you're working at home, just like it does in the office. So that's fantastic. Another question, I'm not sure whether it's entirely legal orientated that's come in, but I have an underperforming staff member. It might sound rude, but I mean, I want to kind of discipline them. but I'm finding it difficult. So how do I kind of discipline underperforming worker working from home during this pandemic? And, how did that get me into trouble?
Yeah, good question. Great questions, everybody. Fair play. So the key thing for me is we're now in a new business as normal. The initial transfer to remote working has happened, and we're now working away. So any employee issues, or whether they might be grievances or they might be disciplinary, we need to be dealing with them. I would say first thing is try and do as much as you can as visually as you can. So there's loads of technology out there, whether that's Zoom, GoToMeeting, there's loads of them, Skype, even FaceTime, whatever is your, Microsoft Teams, there's lots of them. Whatever is your business communication tool at this time, if you're dealing with an issue, then you need to deal with it as visually as you can, because in dealing with a disciplinary, like the person asked about there, the more visual and verbal that is, the better chance we have. I would say try and nip things in the bud early. If this has been a good employee and there's been no issues, and now they're working from home and you're noticing productivity issues, etc., maybe that's because we're expecting them to work normal business hours, but that's not feasible because they have kids at home. So I would say start with the whole concept of asking questions by saying, look, I've noticed a difference in your performance. What's causing that? How can I help alleviate that? Do the nip it in the bud conversation first. And if you still are finding there is no improvement, maybe you need to put a performance improvement plan in place. Maybe you need to change the person's hours. Maybe they need to do some of the work at night when the kids are gone to bed. Find out what the barriers are. And then if you have to do a disciplinary, do it as you would ordinarily. You need to email them the details of the allegation. You need to ensure you do separation of process, and you need to hear what they have to say. So follow the same rules as you would ordinarily and do it as visual as you can.
Brilliant advice. Fantastic. And God, there's such an engaged group of people today. God almighty. Facebook has lit up because there's another great question come through. Can you ask Caroline if annual leave continues to accrue if you're on payroll but no work is being carried out?
So if the person is on layoff, first of all, just to clarify for somebody who might need it, then your holidays pause. So if it's a case the person's on layoff, it pauses. If the person is on the wage subsidy scheme, then they're on your payroll. And ultimately, holidays will continue to accrue if they're working during that period of time. So they're back on payroll. Lots of this is evolving as well because the legislation is new. It's literally just been written fastest ever, which is really, really good to put supports in place. So I would say that'll be an evolving situation. But ultimately, if the employee is working, they accrue holiday based on the hours that they work. And basically their contract of employment, if they're on the wage subsidy, they're a normal employee working away.
Okay, fantastic. That's brilliant. And there's a message in here from Owen, and he says, what's the best approach in compensating employees that are spending more on electricity and heat due to working from home?
I think that's a tricky one because for a lot of people, they might be spending more on electricity, i.e., because they have their computer plugged in, but they're saving lots in terms of time and petrol or diesel or transport costs, etc. And what we're finding is employees are saying, listen, I'm beyond delighted to be working from home. I really want to make this work. So going forward, when we return to what is a new normal, people will be able to do that. I think that's something you need to look at. There are revenue guidelines in relation to minimums and stuff like that you can look at. But I think that's more kind of a negotiation you do from a business perspective to see what's fair and reasonable. But it's definitely not something we're seeing coming up from employees saying, I want to be compensated, because they're genuinely so happy about the fact that they're actually saving time and money overall.
Okay, brilliant. Now, question coming in quite a lot, and Alan's the latest one to ask it is, what HR supports are available for small businesses working from home? So obviously we have the layoff schemes for our staff members, but I know there's a bunch of other local enterprise office and
There is
Enterprise Ireland initiatives out there. Um,
this,
sorry.
There's some great ones. There's the opportunity that if you're an Enterprise Ireland client or you're an LEO client, that you can get €2,500 of a voucher to support you with remote working, ICT, HR advice, actually. So again, you need to identify what's most important for your business. So for example, for some clients, they've had to buy webcams. That's not going to use your voucher. But for some, they're using it for buying a remote computer, or they're looking for ICT help, to get the networks working. For others, they feel that helping with their HR strategy in terms of the structure of what the business needs to look like going forward is the best use of their money in that regard. So have a look at those. They're available on the local enterprise office and Enterprise Ireland websites, and they're really easy to apply for, and they've very proactively made them available to clients, and they're processing them really quickly as well. So I think that'll be a benefit and a help to everybody.
Brilliant. So I'm going to put in for a second. So number one, there's lots and lots of resources that we can check out. It's www.localenterprise.ie/response is where we can go to see what supports are available for us. One you mentioned, which I think is fantastic, Caroline, so I'm so glad you mentioned, was it's called the Business Continuity Voucher. So that's the voucher that's available up to a cost of, I think it's €2,500 on consultancy and advice. So if we need HR support, we can avail of that voucher to get HR strategies in place, HR templates built, and HR consultancy done for our business. So that's called the Business Continuity Voucher. And so it's an obvious one. One that people don't leverage enough is mentoring. So one thing that the local enterprise offices are doing now for free is they're offering business mentoring for free, remotely via Zoom video calls and so on. So again, if I had HR questions or queries, my logical thing to do would be to contact my local enterprise office, talk to them and see what free mentoring I could get in the area I feel I need assistance. And the compliments that flew out in my general direction about you, Caroline, was for an online training session you did at the local enterprise office. I think it was Limerick. You did a fantastic training session, and that's another thing that a lot of businesses can get support for when it comes to the issue of HR and other business areas, is check out the site for free or very low-cost training sessions that will help you navigate this difficult time. Other things is there's a Lean for Micro initiative, which is again an initiative that the local enterprise have that helps you make your business leaner. And at the end of the day, certainly we need to box and to run our businesses far more efficiently in these challenging times than maybe we could have got away with running in the past. So that's another initiative. And then the local enterprise offices have teamed up with Microfinance Ireland for reduced loans. So loans at a repayment scheme of 4.5% instead of whatever it used to be 6 or 7%, with no payments and no interest for the first 6 months. So my advice to Alan and everyone else looking for support is check out localenterprise.ie/response and contact your local enterprise office as your first point of action and ask them what's available to you. So fantastic stuff. As regards, let's talk about retaining staff during these challenging times. So,
Yeah, I suppose like one of the big things, Greg, that comes up all the time is people are spending lots on their employer brand. They're working really hard to be an employer of choice. They're really working hard to retain good people. But I think this whole pandemic and the crisis has given people an opportunity to really show how good an employer they are. And it's not, around the piece of, well, did I get paid or didn't I, or what was the story? Because a lot of businesses, that's taken out of their hands because of the situation they find themselves in. It's how they were treated. And I think that piece of, whenever we do employee surveys, it's all about communication, communication, and more communication. So I would say huge emphasis on communication and really trying to, keep people updated during this whole pandemic in relation to what's going on with the business. Give them, we call them a town hall, which is like a State of the Nation address from the most senior person in the organisation. Even if people are on layoff, do a well-being check-in call with people. People are doing Zoom coffee breaks or meet your pet. So people are just doing check-ins to see how's everybody doing, is everybody okay? Look, if anybody needs help, we're available. Please do get in touch with us. So I would say your retention is very much around your one-to-one communication. And we know some managers are better than others at ensuring communication happens with their team. But again, trying to do team huddles, trying to do communication, give people projects to do so there's still a bit of engagement going on. Obviously, if people are on layoff, they are paused, but that doesn't mean to say you can't do the check-ins with them, etc. So try and have a very good communication plan would be my key tip around retention, and also a well-being proposition. So how are you going to ensure you're supporting people as best you can during this time? And between sleep, eating, meditation, exercise, there's loads of well-being, really helpful, beneficial webinars, links, advice, tips, etc., that we can be sharing with people. And I think that's really important. And the other thing is, a lot of employers will have employee assistance programs in place. So again, remind people about that employee assistance program if they haven't been taking advantage of it, because it is really, really helpful at this time, where again, people, if they're having financial difficulties or relationship difficulties, whatever, they've got that support service available to them as well.
Okay, fantastic stuff. There's a question there. It's to do with retention, I suppose, but also it's to do with production and output as well. How can I monitor staff productivity when they're working remotely? Any tips?
I think you have to change your mindset around the fact that it's not going to be the same. For some employees, they're super disciplined, super organized, and they've got the right work environment at home to make them really productive. For others, it's outside of their control. They've got children in the mix, or they've got a shared house. The technology mightn't be great. And I think we need to start by having an honest conversation with the person to say, right, how is this going to work? What can we expect in terms of output? I'm a massive fan of time management training. And again, I would say remind people of good time management practices. So doing a default diary for the week to schedule the work and what is it that's realistic in terms of what you'll achieve this week. So the manager and the employee are both on the same page, and having flexibility with the employee as well in relation to when they might do that work, and not expecting them to be online all of the time in terms of the day. Having more flexibility, I think, is important around that. But I think if you manage the work schedule, then you'll be able to manage the productivity, because it's about getting the work done and doing a weekly check-in call with people. Some people are doing daily check-ins. Again, that's great, but once a week they should be a task meeting to check in on how are you getting on with the key projects, how are you getting on in terms of the timeline, etc. So everybody's on the same page. And a lot of employees are super stressed as well, remember, saying, I need to be, because I'm working from home, I actually need to be working harder. Whereas that's not the case. We want people taking their breaks. We want people, managing this time properly in line with what's fair for both parties. So I'd say have the chat sooner rather than later to set an understanding in terms of expectations.
Brilliant advice. And then another thing, and again, we've kind of covered this, and it's just about communicating, and it's about communicating ideally through video, and as face to face as you can. But question in, how can I keep staff morale high when I don't know what the future offers? And I suppose that's probably how a lot of business owners feel at the
Yeah,
moment. Is they
yeah,
don't
like
know why, or
that's
maybe.
the rock and hard place a lot of businesses are in. I think honesty is the way to go. I think in the absence of communication, people will fill the void themselves and think the worst, most likely. Whereas if you're being honest with people to say, look, this is where things are at this week, this is where things are at, for the next couple of weeks based on what we know. There's a lot of industry leaders stepping up to the plate, whether it's the local enterprise office, whether it's the Fault Ireland's, it's the whatever, for your industry and for your sector. I would say get some guidance from them in terms of what do they expect in terms of return, what do they expect in terms of, the phasing in, etc. And I think just be honest. I mean, everybody's in the same boat in this. There might be different varying levels, like some organizations like supermarkets and pharmacies are busy, busy, busy up the walls, and those vital workers, we're so grateful and admirable of the work they're putting in. And for others, they're closed, like pubs and restaurants. And I think we're all in it together though, but it's the communication that makes the difference. So I would say communicate what you know. Don't overpromise what you don't know. So if you think the future looks uncertain, I think just let people know for now, lads, for the next 4 weeks, we're all going to be on the COVID-19 payment, or we're going to be on the wage subsidy, and we're going to review things again in 4 weeks, and we'll give you honest feedback in relation to where we're at. And I think if you're doing that, people really appreciate it, and they know then that they're getting kind of, honest, up-to-date, timely communication. And I don't think anybody has the answers. But I think the other thing that helps is if you can give them confidence as the business owner or the manager that you have a business strategy in place, so that you're working hard on, so what do we expect the future to hold? And you're aligning your HR strategy to that business strategy, because no doubt a lot of organizations are looking at restructuring, are looking at, some departments won't be relevant in the new world, and more departments will absolutely be flying. So I think that restructuring is again something you just need to be honest with and let people know. And the better advance notice or expectation structuring you do, the easier it'll be for people to take the bad news if it is coming their way. But we're hoping that that'll be minimal, and for most businesses it'll be a reinventing, and it'll be a tweaking, and it'll be a fine tuning of the offering. Or for others, they'll be innovative in terms of new offerings. So we're hoping job retention will be core to the coming out of this.
Okay, fantastic stuff. Let's talk about remote working, because obviously that's the place we find ourselves in at the moment. But if you don't mind me being so bold, just in case we forget this, there's 2 questions in which takes us in reverse to do with holidays and staff. So I'll read them out to you very quickly, if that's okay, Caroline, and we'll address them. So Kathy O'Donovan asks, in relation to holiday staff are on reduced hours but not working, but being paid under the wage subsidy scheme, will holidays accrue as normal as per hours worked? So essentially, if you're working on reduced hours, is it going to work on hours worked?
Yeah, so I suppose if it's somebody who's on short time, well then their holidays accrue based on the reduced hours that they're working. So if Mary is working 2.5 days a week, Mary gets her holidays accrued based on the 2.5 days a week if she's on short time. The wage subsidy is new to us, because we're paying people on full-time work, but they're not, for some of them, they're working reduced hours. For more of them, they're working full-time hours. So that one is one that I think we need to get more clarity on. But normally holidays accrue based on hours worked, not based on what you pay somebody. So I would be saying watch this space.
Sure.
And it's one that we definitely be giving more information on, but I would say at the minute, if you were doing your holiday calculation, it would be based on hours worked.
Sure, and as you said all along, it's probably a good time to be very transparent with your workers and say this is the way, this is the way, this is the way it is. There may be maybe changes in things down the line, but this is essentially how we're treating it. Just again to be fully transparent. Brilliant.
Yeah, and I think with holidays as well, Greg, just to say, like for a lot of employers, we're encouraging employees now to take holidays. So somebody who's working remotely, or somebody who's in the front line, like we're trying to get people to take holidays for rest and recuperation. And also, what we don't want is to be going into June and people have 2 weeks holidays and they've taken no holidays and they're all burnt out. So we need to balance rest and recuperation with holiday planning. And if employees request holidays, I would say try and facilitate where feasible in line with business requirements, as you've always done. And if people haven't holidays booked between now and say the end of May, I'd be encouraging them to take them. You can request employees to take holidays within 30 days, giving them notice. But again, I would say it's for their well-being as much as anything, because people need the break, because again, it's not normal. There's nothing normal about this. People have additional pressures and stresses, and getting a few days break is actually really good to recharge the batteries.
Yeah. I mean, we don't even know the stress subconsciously we're under at the moment. It's incredible. So let's talk about remote work, and there were a few questions in. Hopefully that answers Kathleen's question as well. So the question asked, very simple one, is how important is a routine when remote working? So what we're finding is a lot of our staff are working different hours and taking breaks at different times and so on. So how important is routine when remote working?
Okay, so it's a great question. I suppose productivity in general is really good if we work to people's circadian rhythm, which is their body clock. And generally, some people will say, I'm a night owl, I work best at 12 o'clock at night. But most people work best first thing in the morning, do the kind of challenging, tedious, detail-orientated work. Obviously, after they've checked their emails, etc., then you would do that kind of before lunch. Come back from lunch, do your meetings, do your webinars, do your calls, do all of those kind of things. And the really important thing is that you do a plan for the next day based on what you've planned. And that ties into doing your default diary for the week, so that you're saying, okay, what do I need to do for the week? I'm a massive believer that you should allocate time slots to things. So for example, we could be on here for an hour, Greg, and we wouldn't even notice time. But if we say, right, we've a 45-minute slot, time expands to fill the time available. So when you're doing your default diary and you're doing your work schedule, make sure you give time slots to work. So again, I would encourage people in terms of their routine to use a default diary and to use kind of allocating time and eat the frog, which is do the toughest job that you really are off, but it's really important for the business for you to do that first thing in the morning. I think we have to be realistic now. Routine in terms of normal working hours, to me, there isn't one at the moment. I think you have to be flexible with people to work to what suits them. So if people need to start work at 7 o'clock in the morning, or if they need to work later at night to facilitate them to have a few hours off in the middle of the day, you're not setting a new norm. You're basically saying, lads, we're doing this now in line with COVID-19. And when it's all over, we'll be going back to what is the new normal in line with business requirements. And let's worry about what that looks like then. But for now, you're giving people as much support as you can to make remote working work for them and work for you.
Okay, fantastic. Here's another great question. So how can I get non-techie staff members on board with remote working? So I suppose we've seen a lot of businesses saying, well, some staff members just say they don't have a laptop or they don't know how to use something, and they're nearly opting out of working from home. So how do we get I suppose people that aren't digital natives or comfortable with technology to embrace it as part of remote working?
I think we need to go back to basics. Look, this is my first time using a Be Live kind of facility, etc. But to be fair to you, you were like, right, let's do a quick demo and let's get sorted. everything is really easy to use, I find now. So, like, technology has made itself very color by numbers nearly, you know. So I think though we need to not take for granted somebody's fear of it in advance. So the trick to me is that you take it that if somebody has a reluctance or isn't familiar, that you do the color by numbers. I think it's great to have a guide, a step-by-step guide to say, this is step one, this is step two. I know Mary in my office is always giving me, this is the step one, the step two, step three, and I love it because it really makes it easy. So if you encounter a problem, you can troubleshoot it yourself. So again, those kind of simple things I think are really helpful. And I think then you're working with people. Like some people are saying, oh, I'm allergic to the camera on. And it's saying, well, look, the benefits are all the following. So look, let's just trial it in our weekly call. And then you get people comfortable and they'll start to get more comfortable with using it. So I think eat the elephant, bite-sized chunks, little steps. But I would be trying to say, listen, this isn't an optional thing to say, I don't want to be doing it, because this is the new world. Remote working is it's brilliant, and loads of people were doing it in different ways. But as I say, it's different because now of the amount of challenges that it presents with all the new mix. But people are doing an amazing job working remotely, and I think it'll be really positive when all this is over, because lots more people will do remote working. There'll be less travel time. There'll be easier work-life balance. Like it's a really good thing to come out of all of this, really, isn't it?
Certainly for some businesses, 100%, and you're absolutely right. People will start to start to work from home 2 days a week instead of going in to the office on a big commute for 5 days, and so on in some businesses. And I do think the reality is, certainly when it comes to video. So say you take a platform like Zoom or Microsoft Teams, where you can have video conversations, or even Skype. Nothing builds a relationship more with a prospective client or with a staff member than talking to them face to face. And sadly, we can't meet people in the real world at the moment. So video is the fastest way to build relationship, to nurture relationships with our staff face to face. A question that came in there was, staff members still require mentoring and job training. How can that be done remotely? And I suppose the answer to that somewhat is it can be done through video technology. Much easier to nurture a relationship or show someone how to do something using video conferencing than try to explain something over a telephone or via email. So it's about really grasping that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm a massive fan of the concept of virtual training now, but I think we've got to change our way of doing things. So rather than just thinking we're going to mentor people exactly the same or train people exactly the same, that's not the way it's going to be. We need to mix it up with how it'll work better via virtual training. And as you said, there's loads of great platforms, but I do think we need to train managers on making that shift and explaining to them the benefits of the visual, the benefits of the other technologies that are available, you know, and how to do this again. And again, you know, there's no rocket science to it, but there's always better ways, and let's maximize those opportunities, because mentoring and coaching, etc., are going to be key to getting us out of this. And you know, businesses, you know, are going to be so reliant on their people, and I think we've really seen leadership from people throughout the organization at varying levels at this time, where people are going, oh my God, this staff member has just been a superstar. They've really stepped up to the plate, and they've started training other staff members in relation to Zoom or in relation to something else, you know. So it's brilliant if we encourage staff to give us suggestions, be innovative, contribute in different ways. We're seeing lots of value add in that regard as well.
Absolutely brilliant. So if you were to wrap up kind of your top tips for remote working, what would your top tips be?
So I think for remote working, put a realistic plan in place with your employees in terms of their work schedule, in terms of the time that they're available, in terms of what works for them and what works for you. I would say do an assessment to see, have they got everything they need? Is their broadband working? Have they got the tools they need? Have they got the information they need? What are the barriers? And let's see, can we get them reduced or eliminated as much as we can? And my other top tip is to make sure you use a default diary where you set work goals that you're going to achieve, so that your manager can do a weekly task meeting to assess how you're getting on in relation to those. And both people are on the same page then in relation to productivity and output and expectation for the week, which I think will be hugely beneficial for both the manager, the employee, and the organisation overall. I suppose some top takeaways in our conclusion, I would say mind your mental health and that of your staff. So try and get lots of fresh air, have a structure to the day, take your breaks as you would ordinarily, and assure staff that this is short term and we'll bounce back positively together. And what that means will be different. And also, I think it's really important that we try and give back during this time. And I think, whatever that looks like to your customers, to your staff, I think well-being initiatives, helping the local community. There's brilliant opportunities and initiatives out there. And I think doing good during this time is really good for all of us in terms of getting through this together. So they're my top tips. And I also think ask for help and get the advice when you need it, because there's lots of supports available that you might be eligible for, whether that's from the LEO, that's Enterprise Ireland, the different supports we spoke about. I think that's really important. And overall, I suppose we've been talking a lot about communication and how important it is. And the final piece is just really stay positive, because it's really hard when there's so much information coming at you from all angles. Try and get information from reliable, accurate sources, whether that's from the HSC, whether that's from gov.ie, localenterprise.ie or Enterprise Ireland. And at least it's accurate, it's trustworthy, because there's so much information, it's causing lots of confusion. And I think at least then you're making really good, informed decisions for your business, which is so important. Huge thank you from me to Greg, who's done a fabulous job with his technology and making it work. It's not easy because everybody's on the internet at the minute working from home, and there's huge pressures on the internet. So fair play to you, Greg. Hopefully people found this useful and interesting, and huge thanks to both Karen Fernandez and Sarah Bowen from Enterprise Ireland for the opportunity to do this session with you today, Greg. It's been very enjoyable, lovely lunchtime chat.
Likewise, you're an absolute star. Well, have a very productive afternoon, and we appreciate your time. So thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Take care, everybody.
You're released. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Greg. Bye, everybody.
So, guys, thank you so much for attending our very first Lunch and Learn session today on Facebook. We will look at all the comments and questions on the live stream and make sure that where possible we have answered any questions. So if any questions have snuck by that we haven't answered, we'll do our very, very best to answer them for you guys. I just want to personally just wish you guys all the very best with your businesses. These are very uncertain times, and it is very difficult. And I do appreciate that for some of us, working from home is not doable. If I'm a bar or a restaurant or a local shop that has to be shut. So all I can say is possibly now is the time to start to think of preparing for when we come out of this. So maybe look at your website. Talk to the local enterprise office. See whether you can get any business mentoring and support, because we can't all continue if our businesses are shut. So now is the time to prepare for the future when we'll come out of this, and hopefully we'll survive. And I know it's very, very uncertain times, but check out localenterprise.ie/response and contact your local enterprise office and get as much help as you physically can. So for me at the moment, Greg Fry, it's a goodbye for now. And drop us any questions that you have, and hopefully we'll see you on another Lunch and Learn soon.
Your local enterprise office, helping your business respond.